assessment, if any, are you giving or considering in specific streets or neighborhoods or lakes with high water table levels, as we've seen out in the Eagle Lake in Texas Corners this year? For example, if a lake has to institute a no-wake rule when it is normally an all-sports lake.
Very good question. When I was asked not too long ago. And the question was, is our values getting hurt on Crooked Lake, Eagle Lake, Crooked Lake Delton, and Crooked Lake Texas both? And the appraiser in me answers the question, are sales being hurt? Are properties selling for less than what they did a year ago? And the answer to that is no. I lived on Crooked Lake, Texas for 20 years, when you could walk across the lake and properties were selling, when you could walk across what we lovingly refer to as mud end. And now it's completely opposite that. Values are not as inconsistent with those conditions unless it's environmental, where you have contamination and there's health and safety. Those types of conditions take a long time to affect value.
Because it's cyclical. People are buying it knowing that the levels are going to go down.
Correct.
And normalize at some
Correct.
point.
I bought a lot on Crooked Lake when my view was the side of a barn that was sided with backs of pinball machines. And everyone thought that was nuts. My wife did too. But ultimately, knowing the market, the lot prices were just too much for people to buy the lot and put up with that kind of improvement. And I think the same is true when you look at developmental property, particularly lake property, for buyers and sellers to react. It's probably not a good time to sell, and the price could be affected. But until we start seeing homes sell for 10, 15, 20% less, the appraiser has nothing to compare it to. So the answer to the question is, I think the appraiser does what he or she typically does, and that's find sales. How did they sell? And you look at what condition the lake was in at the same time, and what I see right now, the sales so far are slower, but I haven't seen any that have been affected. Have you, man?
No.
So Crooked Lake Delton is seeing a lot of press lately, a lot more than the other lakes. And believe it or not, whether a problem actually exists or doesn't exist, if the market perceives that it exists, your values begin to get hurt. And they're probably going on the point where they have the drain commissioner now saying, that something has to be done. But I agree with you, it's still cyclical. We had times when lake levels were down 4 feet.
So bad press will affect the value more than the lake levels.
Yeah, I guess I'll go on camera to say that. If someone starts a rumor that a particular lake has, or that a neighborhood has contaminated water, until that gets out of the press and exposed for being correct or not correct, it can.
Yeah, there's a stigma that's attached to it,
Correct.
whether it's true or not.
Yeah, there's
Right.
a specialty in appraising called stigma appraising. You can do that if you choose to, where properties are affected by things other than specific to the property. Someone died there, or there was a bad car accident in front of it. Any number of different things.
Why do you use well septic issues in determining value? This has derailed a few transactions.
I think always when we look at homes that have well and septics, you try to compare it to other homes that have well and septics. And if it doesn't have a well and septic, then you have to determine, is there a difference? Would the market pay something different for a city water, city sewer situation as compared to a well and septic, or vice versa? Generally, I don't experience a lot of issues. Quite often, well and septics for appraisers are difficult to determine exactly where they are. Sometimes they're underground. Sometimes there are indications. Again, back to what Marty said, we can only report what we see and provide that information. I do have sometimes on occasion lender-specific requirements that would say you need if you have a well and septic, you need 2 sales comparables with well and septic. And even if those aren't the best comparables, I try to include them just to satisfy their requirements.
And I think the reality to that is The only reason an appraiser would do that is if there were a market difference between well and septic. If there's no market difference between well and septic, and you state that in the appraisal, that should be good for Fannie, Freddie, FHA, whomever is reading the appraisal, to say that. I think recently FHA changed its distances from 50 to 75 feet, regardless of what code is, which hopefully NAR will go to bat and go, this doesn't make any sense. If code allows 50 feet between well and septic, you can't impose 75 feet. You're going, that's not fair. Depth, for instance, if you have a 300-foot well and the chronological difference is 25 feet, but there's 400 feet difference between the well point and the septic tank, that requires, even that requires an inspection. And from what I hear, you can answer me to that. How often does FHA give waivers?
Yeah, we don't do FHA.
Okay.
So unless it's addressed in the purchase agreement, we don't even care about well and septic.
And my sources are telling me that getting a waiver on a well and septic is almost impossible. But, the reality is, what Matt's saying is that the reality is, okay, so this sale falls through because the well and septic are not far. The next buyer will come along and buy it conventionally or cash and not care.
Okay.
The point is it doesn't affect the market value.
I think to tie a little well knowledge into one of the things that I'm seeing in some of the areas that I'm working in are these PFAS plumes. And if I have a well and septic, I'm absolutely looking at the map and I'm going to report how close or if it's in one of these plumes that's known and mapped. So that's a well and septic concern that I would be aware of as a realtor. I'm going to address it ahead of time.
Well, and I lived in the days of the 307 sites, and Manny, I think we all did appraise when there was a 307 site of contamination, for instance, in the D Avenue area at the cross section of 6, there was years ago a gas tank that leaked and got into some wells and where the flume was going. It's not such a big deal anymore, but back then, if you were within a few feet or within a prescribed distance of a 307 site, the appraiser had to note it. The reality is the market still wasn't recognizing. The market recognized back when the subdivision off 8th Street, where Upjohn used to dump its chemicals. What's the name of the subdivision back there? Anyway, the point is
Township, I think.
it's in Texas Township.
Oh, okay.
At any rate, the point is it hit so much press, and the tests came back consistently as contaminated. The plant got hurt. People would not buy back there.
You're talking about that executive, that Hidden Cove back there, or the Glades?
The Glades, thank you, thank you, the Glades, and that was one of our first contamination scares. So when you talked about well and septic, Lake Doster was another one. Back when the dump on Kane Road was contaminated. It got to the point where the market knew it and the market wouldn't buy it until they ran city water. So you have situations where you have PFAS and everything else. Some people would prefer well over city water and vice versa. So it's the appraiser's job to find out what the market is, what the market likes. In the case of Lake Doster, back then, if you had a well, you were going to have city water or it wasn't going to sell. That's the market talking, not me.
Do you ever use pending offers as comparables?
I do, a lot of the time, and it's best when I have appraised the property and I know the sale price. A lot of pending sales, realtors will show a pending price that may not be the actual price. They don't want that sale price to get out if that deal falls through. So it will vary in terms of the weight I assign it when I do the appraisal. But yes, invariably, I'll use a pending sale a lot of the time. It's a current sale, and especially if I've done the appraisal on it, I'll have the true sale price.
Will you use it as more support, or will you use it as a true?
Well, it'd be
Good
more
comparable.
more support more than anything. Correct.
I think any information listing or pending or anything that's pertinent, of course, we're going to look at it. It does, it can sometimes indicate what a house is not worth. for example. I'm gonna pay more for this house than I can buy that one for, it's on the market right now. So there are ways to look at, all information is good information.
Do you contact the listing agent first if the home doesn't appraise?
That sounds like a test question. And the answer to
You are
that
on
is
camera.
no. There are uniform standards, or USPAC, uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, dictate very clearly that your client is your client, and they are the ones who get the results of the appraisal. And we, with distribution the way it is today, and with appraisal practice the way it is today, appraisers are being very careful about making sure the appraisal gets done and gets sent back in. So the answer to that is no. The appraisal gets done, it gets sent through whatever system you're using and back to your client, and then where it goes, whether it goes to the loan officer or underwriting, it goes back there first.
I think it's important to say, one of the things I do ahead of an appraisal is try to reach the listing agent to make the appointment. And I generally will ask, is there anything unique or unusual, or are people related? Is there anything you want me to know before I go into this? And it gives them the opportunity to provide information. I can provide data, we can look at that. We don't have to use it, we can. Maybe it's information we have access to, maybe it's not. So I think I welcome information ahead of time, but when you know an appraisal is coming in low or below a sales price, I work twice as hard. And I'm sure you do too. It's, you know the ramifications of what's occurring, and if you truly believe you're right, I make sure that I'm right, and I put that information in the report.
I think it's to use the opportunity now to say that discussion about the property, about value, can take place between the agent and the appraiser anytime until after the appraisal is done. Once the results are done, the results are done. So any input, I agree with Matt. I'm happy to meet an agent at the house with a packet that gives me all the information, how the property was listed, why it was listed, how long it took to sell, recent improvements, and all the things that you would normally interview the seller about is important. But the results of the report are very clearly covered. Up until that point, it is not unethical, it is not a breach of appraiser independence for the agent to come and talk to the appraiser saying, listen, the house next door sold for this and this sold for this, even to the point it's got to be worth this, and please do the best you can. Short of what appraiser independence calls coercion, there's no reason the agent can't literally try and sell a property. It doesn't help, but many times it helps to inform the appraiser and give he or she all the information.
So, but in a little bit of follow-up on that, but in most situations, the lender is your client, right? Mm-hmm. So, is it inappropriate then for a short appraisal to have a conversation after the appraisal has taken place with either the listing agent or the buyer's agent outside of the lender for the agents to come to you and say, hey, what about this? Why didn't you use this comparable or something like that? Or do you then at that point say to them, look, you got to go through the lender first, and then we'll relook at what you're sending us?
We'll have a discussion then a little bit about reconsideration of value, because that's what you're talking about. And reconsideration of value is trying to be addressed on the GSE level to come up with a form that can be used for it. But it's really the agent coming back and saying, can we talk? The first answer to your question is no, I can't. I can't discuss or breach my confidentiality with anyone but my client without my client's permission. Once I have my client's permission, I can do that. It's typically not done. On a reconsideration of value, the reconsideration of value has to be ordered by the lending institution. In an FHA's case, it has to be ordered by the designated underwriter. In VA's case, there is a specific person, and only one person who can order that. There are cases where the selling agent will try and order a reconsideration of value, and that's where lending institutions have to say no. This has to be done by the purchaser. So the answer to your question is no. My client relationship remains with the lender.
How impactful is the condition of a detached garage?
You know, things are what they are. Does it still have value? Is it in good enough condition to have value? Is it repairable? Condition always, throughout the entire process of the appraisal, all the improvements, conditions are important. And I've had situations where a garage may exist but have no value. I've had garages that I have a situation in a neighborhood, a home inspection came back, I found out later, and the perimeter was rotten. And there's a company that lifts them up and puts in new perimeters in that neighborhood because it's quite common. So once that word gets out, I think people are a little more open to, there's a remedy to the condition of this garage. So it pays to be aware of what the market expects, and the utility of the improvement. Can it be used? Can it be repaired? I think that's kind of how it factors into my consideration.
It used to be, if a building didn't have a contributory value from FHA standpoint, then it didn't have to be repaired. It didn't have to, peeling paint's what I'm talking about. Building can have peeling paint, and even though it doesn't have any value, it still has to be repaired. And that's a little different than the way it used to be a while ago. You could have a building, and just declare that it didn't have any value, and you didn't have to do anything with the peeling paint. Nowadays, I've had sellers come telling me they had to prop it up while they painted it. And that was because there was peeling paint.
I've also had situations where lenders want me to comment on the safety of the interior of the garage. Think like a dangerous wood stove in the corner, they might want me to point out if there's an old hoist in the ground that someone used to lift cars with, those sorts of things. Some clients will specifically want me to mention those things. Generally, I take a photo on the inside of each garage just to show that I looked at it. And I think any safety issues, again, back to the safety issues, we bring that to the attention of the lender.